Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Veteran Voices in Code. I'm your host, Greg Drobny, Student Outreach Coordinator and Recruitment Manager for Code Platoon. I'm joined today by Daniel Tolczyk. I think I got that right?
Yep.
Daniel is a graduate of Kilo Platoon, right? So he's old school, I guess you could call it at this point. Code Platoon. He's been around for a while, which is great. Some of the guests we've had have been more recent graduates. Daniel's been out there a while working in this industry. So Daniel, first, before I start anything, thanks for joining me. Thanks for coming on our show, for lack of a better term. I always start with the same first question. So we're going to start off with a personal question, but it's becoming a tradition. What made you raise your right hand? What made you say, yep, I'm going to join the United States military and do this thing?
Let's see. I think it was, I was in high school. I didn't really feel like I was going anywhere or doing anything, and I wasn't really interested in college at that point. My stepdad had served in the Marine Corps, and I was kind of like, you know what? I'm going to prove that I can do it too. And, it was just simple as, and signed up. Next thing you know, getting shipped off right after I graduate.
That's awesome. I've run into a lot of people who kind of had that "I'll show you" kind of mentality. Like, I'll prove to you I can do it.
I like to rise to a challenge.
Nice, nice. I knew a guy who was a ranger who literally joined because his dad said he couldn't do it, and he did simply for that reason. So you became a linguist. Was that originally your goal when you joined, or is that something you fell into?
So actually, what I really wanted to do when I first joined up was play in the Marine Corps band. I even auditioned and everything. I used to be a trombone player, jazz trombone, concert, marching band, all that stuff. I was a band nerd in high school. And then, you know, I was a little nervous during that initial interview and initial audition. And then I went and took the ASVAB and I scored really well on my ASVAB. And I'm like, well, you just need a passing score to get into the band. Am I really doing everything I can be doing with this high of a score? And I was like, okay, I want to do Intel. That sounds super cool. What can I get into there? Started talking to the recruiters. They found this whole, signals intelligence, linguist thing. You have to go take this test. That sounds really ridiculous hard. We don't know anything else about it. And yeah, just went on from there.
That's super cool. Well, interestingly, so I knew about the linguist part before we started, and just before we went on, we were talking about how we've had a lot of linguists come through the program. I didn't know about the musical connection. The second episode we did of this very show was about musicians who have become coders. So
I actually DJ and I'm getting into music production too. I missed out on the first couple. I would have been good in either of those, I guess.
That's fantastic. No, we've had a disproportionate number of military band people come through our program. So if anybody's watching this and they want to see about the connections between music and coding, look that up on YouTube on this same channel. We've had a number of musicians come through, which I find fascinating, both linguists and musicians. So at any rate, you were a linguist, you're an Arabic linguist. First, let's talk about when you got out of the military. Did you have a desire to get into this industry, the tech industry? You said you were a little bit lost, wasn't sure what to do. How did you get?
At that point, tech was even on my radar. Like I was like, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to use my GI Bill. I want to move back to Chicago, be with, friends and family. And I initially was studying psychology and criminology. And I just found myself not really like, I enjoyed the classes, but I just found college life to be not what I wanted or had hoped. And it was a struggle to just even like want to show up to class anymore. So, from there, I decided, I'm going to step back from that, stop burning through this GI Bill, which at that point was just there to pay my rent, and kind of started looking into other things, worked a bunch of odd jobs, started being a bouncer in some local bars. Did that for a couple years before moving out west to Washington State, where I also kicked around for a bit doing random things, anywhere from managing a pizza place to being a mall cop. And then I was like, I'm doing this physical security thing. I've always been a nerd. I've built my own computers and gaming. I'm like, why am I not doing stuff that I actually know and I'm interested in? Why don't I combine my interest in computers with my interest in security? So I started, digging in from that point to try and find out what I wanted to do. I went back to school again. I sat in my first coding class and they were trying to teach Java. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to school for IT. Maybe networking's easier than this coding business. I didn't think it was something for me or that I could learn at that point. And so, yeah, I pivoted, started looking at IT and cybersecurity. Code Platoon came later where I'm like, okay, it's going to be useful to know like Python and scripting. It's kind of big in the security world as I started learning and understanding more how things work. And I had some friends who went through Code Platoon and did some work through Code Platoon. They're like, hey, you should come back to Chicago again and do this Code Platoon thing. You'd be perfect for it. And so I, sold everything I owned, packed up my car, drove across the country to do Code Platoon. And then, COVID happened. And, that was that session of it, which was real interesting to try and do it all remote. But, it's led to kind of everything that I've got going for me today.
Sure, sure. That's fantastic. So you kind of got into the tech world. Your desire was more cybersecurity related, which is one of the reasons I reached out to you in the first place, is because that's kind of the core premise of this particular episode and the conversation I wanted to have with you. So I'm going to hit you with a question. I've got a couple of assumptions about cybersecurity versus software engineering. And for the record, I'm not a developer. I'm not a software engineer. Speaking of that whole psychology thing, that's why you hated college. I did a whole master's degree in the field, and I'll tell you, it'll bore the pants off you. You were right to be bored. Yeah, that's great. But at any rate, that's my background. So looking at this from a conceptual perspective, I'm going to offer you a theory that I have, and I want you to tell me I'm wrong and where I'm wrong, or if I am wrong, or if I'm right, how people can use this. We have a lot of people come to me and say, hey, I'm thinking about cybersecurity or maybe software engineering, but I'm not really sure. My theory is it's at the very least, it is easier to go from software engineering into cybersecurity rather than the other way around, because software engineering gives you the skills that are a little bit more transferable than cybersecurity going into software engineering. So am I right in that, or am I wrong in telling people entirely the inaccurate thing?
No, I think you're 100% correct. The biggest problem with people trying to get into cybersecurity, and it was the thing I learned and had to deal with early on, and that's where Code Platoon helped, was that you need a strong technical background to do security work. You cannot secure systems that you don't have an understanding of. If you don't understand networking, if you don't understand software, you can't be a good security person for those systems. So yeah, I think you need a strong foundation in either like an IT networking background or software development to really succeed and be, successful in a cybersecurity space.
Sure. And that's great to hear that I'm not feeding people inaccurate information, first of all. But second, so would it be your contention, maybe assumption, based on what you've seen, are cybersecurity programs out there in general? Some people get like certificates in cybersecurity, or maybe they do it in college. Are those not preparing them well enough in that regard? Like specific to what you're talking about there?
Yeah, so there's it's kind of a growing problem in the cybersecurity space of certificates. Like I've got a bunch of certifications myself. Many of them are valuable, but there's also a lot that aren't. And so people get kind of into this game of like Pokemon, right? Got to catch them all. And they just get these certifications that are literally just taking multiple choice tests. Some people do better in tests than others. And without a strong experience background, that's not enough to really get you the job. They're not really preparing you enough for those things. They might prepare you enough to talk about them and have a good starting point for understanding. But yeah, I don't really think that they're really appropriately preparing. A certification should more be saying, yes, I have these skills, not studying to get the certification after the fact. I think I've had much more success in my certification exams by already just having worked with the material and certifying what I have the knowledge and experience of, rather than seeking out a whole new, certification for something I've never done before and trying to get that and using that to demonstrate any kind of, knowledge or aptitude.
Fair point. So that ties into my second level of assumptions, and maybe this proves true as well, or maybe it doesn't. But I think this connects to exactly what you're saying. From what I've understood and what I've been told, it seems to me that at the entry level, that cybersecurity jobs in general are maybe a little less interesting than entry-level software engineering jobs. So let me stop there and
Yeah.
tell me what you think about that before I get the
I would
next.
say, with the exception of maybe a SOC analyst, there's no such thing as entry-level cybersecurity because it's not an entry-level career field. You need to have, again, that background in IT and networks or software development to really be able to get into security and work on it from there. I don't think you can just, and that's my experience. Like I was managing a pizza place and I'm working on my certifications, listening to YouTube videos from Professor Messer is great for those kind of certifications and learning this stuff. But, I had those things. Nobody wants to hire you without that experience. The certification that's like the checkbox that gets you past HR, but that's not what gets you the job.
Sure, sure. And the reason I asked that to go a little bit further is because, again, I have a lot of students, prospective students, who come to me and say, well, I'm trying to go into this world and I'm trying to decide between cybersecurity and software engineering. And my take, based kind of, and you're kind of affirming this, is that if you're coming into this brand new, a cybersecurity certificate or something equivalent to what Code Platoon does, like a 6-month long thing, is simply not going to land you a very interesting role in the world of cybersecurity.
Nope. You'll likely find those, the closest you'll get that's like towards the low end is the SOC analyst position. And that's a lot of maybe working odd hours on the weekends, reading logs and looking at alerts and dashboards. And, you'll learn a lot doing that from security. And there's some really great trainings out there too that are, cheap to free, that I recommend if people are interested in those kind of things. But that's where you got to start. You can't really, jump higher than that because there's just nowhere to jump. And lately with all the, there's been tech layoffs that have been going on and that's impacted cybersecurity as well. What's happening is there's kind of a flood now of these expert, very high level security professionals who now have to go out and search for new jobs. They're taking all these other jobs that are in security, leaving very large pool of unexperienced people who want to get into cybersecurity, trying to compete against somebody who, has a degree, multiple certifications, and been in the industry 5+ years. And so it makes it even more difficult to break into security when you look at it that way.
Absolutely. And would you say, so comparatively, looking at the entry-level jobs for a software engineer, people who have good coding knowledge and understanding, what does that look like in comparison?
So I was pretty lucky through Code Platoon to get an internship at the end of my, right after I graduated there through the program. And that I think really helped a lot. I think internships are kind of really the key thing from any program to be able to succeed is get that initial foot in the door. Searching for other things. I've seen some other people looking, tech right now is just a difficult thing to break into. But if you've got, it's all about who you know, what can you leverage? Networking. There's certainly networking available in the security realm. Here in Chicago, we have a group called BurbSec, which is fantastic. We meet up, once a month, have a few drinks. We talk shop. We don't talk shop. It's just a nice gathering, getting to know people in the area. I know I've gone to things before when I was more focused on coding. I've gone to like the local Python group. I've gone to several coding related meetups as well. So, networking is really the best thing that's going to help get you into those doors when you're trying to find that entry level thing. So it's really about finding those local communities around you and starting to build those connections. You got to have those, 3 things. You have to have the experience, a certification or connection, ideally all those, maybe even a degree. The more you have in your court on your side when you're going into this thing, the more it's going to help you out in the end.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you touched on that because I think that's not talked about enough is that, we tend to have this bias towards more technical fields in that you think if you have the technical skill and the certification, then networking doesn't matter as much. Oh, it absolutely does, right? I mean, networking is huge in any industry, anywhere from, medical field, the technical field to non-technical fields. In that regard, one of the things I tell people all the time that I think, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts as a graduate, to me, the biggest thing that sets Code Platoon apart is exactly that, in the sense that it's a military and veteran only community. We're the only school out there that offers that. And as a result, our student body is, while smaller, sure, I think it's way tighter than any school alumni community out there for that reason, because everybody has that kind of shared experience. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. For a bit there, I got kind of busy with work and a lot of things myself, and I hadn't been as actively involved in the Code Platoon community. But, It's super easy to just like step back up, step back in. Nobody's like, oh, hey, where have you been? Give you a hard time. Everyone's just like, hey, chat up again. Good to hear from you. What are you up to? And those are connections. Like I'm still friends with those people when I get a chance to talk to them. They're still there. Yeah, it's really just about making the human connection so important right now, especially because with AI is taking a huge role, particularly in like filtering of resumes. You need a human on your side to say, hey, this person's resume is worth looking at. This person, you need to be able to stand out from when everybody looks the same on a piece of paper and when a bot might be filtering you. You need that human, hand essentially. And
Sure.
Code Platoon's great for that.
That's great. And I'm glad to hear that. So shifting gears a little bit, because
Mhm,
you opened the can, so we gotta spill it out and dump those worms out, as the
for
saying
sure.
goes. AI, how has it changed your role in the field of cybersecurity? What has been I'd say the biggest impact first, and then you can add to that as you choose.
So my current role in particular, you know, it's not had a huge direct impact on me for what I do. There's some value in it with like Copilot and some of these ones that kind of help you when I want to just throw together a quick script. And, it's been a couple years now since I've done any direct coding work that, it's a really great, helpful thing to be able to kind of, shoot out a script that maybe I need to send a bunch of, things that like the NVD database, which is a security database of vulnerabilities in software that I commonly have to work with. So, it can be useful in that kind of thing there. Now, outside of my specific field in cybersecurity, it's having a way bigger impact because I don't know if you're familiar with the term script kiddie. It's kind of like this
I've heard of it.
lowest level of hacker, right? That has cursory knowledge, maybe found a tool online, doesn't really know what he's doing. He's just kind of experimenting and getting out there. But now he has this tool that helps him
Mhm.
code. He doesn't understand the code that's being generated, which is a huge another thing I can get into in a second here, but he's just launching that. And now if you have someone who doesn't have English as a first language, they're able to make much more advanced phishing campaigns, which that is a common thing when you see an email and it has bad grammar in it. You can be like, oh, this is a phish. This is a problem email. Now
Right.
with AI, those kind of things are, they're kind of more moving towards the past because that's
Ooh.
just not an issue as much anymore. And now the other thing I wanted to get into is software developers now are using AI to help
Mhm.
assist them. It's another tool that can be useful. And it's very important as a software developer to not let it just do the work for you, but understand why it's writing it and doing it a certain way, because this could be introducing, and we don't even know it, new security flaws into the code. If we're just copy pasting stuff, I mean, that was kind of always a problem if people pull it from directly from Stack Overflow as well. It's very important, before you use somebody else's code to understand what it's doing, why it's doing, how it's doing it, et cetera, before you even consider implementing it. So, that's the other thing that we kind of see with AI in the software and cybersecurity field.
Sure. And in that regard, do you see it as I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this question, but do you see this as being in the future, um, based on what you're saying? Does that mean that cybersecurity almost takes a bigger role than it did before, in the sense of quality, like pre-checking people's code and the software before it's even implemented?
Well, I mean, that's actually kind of always, it's been a big part. And now more and more companies are realizing they have to do it, whether because they realize it's best practice or because, there's a regulation or regulatory body that comes out and says they have to do it. Like, for instance, I currently work in medtech, and
Mhm.
FDA last year released new guidance saying, hey, you need to implement secure software development activities and life cycles. They pushed out a whole document, and that's what I do is make sure that the software development group that I work for, make sure that we're following secure practices, that there's the software development life cycle. And we're making sure that every step of that has security activities, as well as this concept of pushing left, where the sooner we find a security issue within that life cycle, the cheaper and easier it is to address. If we find something in our security requirements early on that says, hey, we need to have this level of encryption on our TLS connections. We do that in the requirement stage, then we go code it. We're not hitting this up in a later stage and testing and being like, oh, wow, we have this weak encryption. Now we got to figure out and getting whatever version of, OpenSSL we've got going on, reconfiguring stuff. et cetera, that cost development time and slows down and can affect release schedules. So yeah, I wanted to say that really early on. It's not software development versus cybersecurity. It's software development and cybersecurity.
That's a fair point. I mean, we may or may not be able to note some recent news items of companies that will remain named where maybe airlines and hospitals shut down for,
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother thing about see, that's right there is where good software practices should be in place as far as how you develop, test, and deploy.
Sure.
Those processes were not followed correctly, obviously.
Right.
I don't know if we want to talk about it that specifically or name names. It's particularly
No,
funny that it's a cybersecurity company that is at fault for one of the biggest,
right.
theoretical cyber attacks accidentally in that regard. But yeah.
Right. But no, I think this subject you brought up, it offers another avenue of discussion, though, of this concept of blending the two of cybersecurity and software being inherently connected. And
Yeah.
I see, I mean, again, I'm looking at this more from a social philosopher perspective. I'm not an engineer. I see this as almost inevitable. Everything is driven by apps, and I mean, from your car to your phone to your home. We've got a Google Nest that controls the temperature. I mean, every aspect is software, but it also has to be secured. Do you see it going that direction as well, where cybersecurity and software engineers almost have to be on the same team, working together almost from the beginning?
Absolutely. I 100% believe that's the case, and that's what needs to happen. It's just a matter, the problem with security, and it's not even a problem with security, it's a business thing. Security does not, in the eyes of most business professionals, provide a value monetarily wise. We're a cost, right? You sink a certain amount of money in. We're in a risk based business of the idea of we're preventing you from paying even bigger costs down the road. So this is why we're worth the cost now.
Right.
So it's a constant, battle back and forth between security and business of implementing and cost and everything else. That's why regulations are great in that regard, because FDA, for instance, is saying, hey, you can't release this product to market unless you meet these security requirements. Now business says, well, we can't even make money off a sale unless we have security. Now there's a reason for them to, invest heavier in that. And so as more regulations come out for that, as more companies realize and see the benefit of investing in integrating secure software development practices into their development life cycles, we're going to see it as a more commonplace thing. I mean, we teach software developers how to do threat modeling, which is a very good practice that happens during the design phase of the life cycle. And, you get those people on board because they're the ones familiar with the code, right? They're handling it. They may not have a security idea, but they know what connects to where, what assets are moving across those connections, how they're made. And so working together, we're able to kind of come up with, what threats can affect us here? Like, what is wrong with this and how can we fix it?
Sure. So to further develop that exact train of thought, since I'm going to throw another wrench into your whole matrix here,
Okay.
since Code Platoon does not have a cybersecurity program, we do have a full stack software engineering program and a DevOps cloud engineering program. Where do you see the DevOps cloud engineering program or that skill set fitting into that same matrix that you were just describing?
So they like to throw in now, because they always like to throw the sec or security word around. There is a thing, DevSecOps. And that's, about integrating using, your automated pipelines and integrating security testing at that point into your development lifecycle. DevOps is supposed to be a lot quicker, a lot more, closely connected, having, developer and security and operations all holding hands together, moving things way faster and producing results quicker. I'm not entirely sure the content of what they're teaching in the program at Code Platoon, so I can't really speak to that directly. But I do know that even at Kilo, they brought in somebody from OWASP, who was a partner. He was at the time working for one of the partner companies. And he came in and kind of did a whole security spiel one day. And we did a whole, like, here's a very vulnerable web application. Let's go hack it and break into it and see these are the kind of issues that can happen when you're not doing, secure coding practices, when you're not testing properly and looking for these things. Because you need to not just test how code works, you need to test how it doesn't work, or, you got to kind of be creative with it a bit.
Sure. No, and that's fair. And what I seem to get kind of across the board when I talk to people in this industry, how people answer that question regarding DevOps varies from company to company, right? And I think it depends a lot on the size of your team, what that DevOps person does and what they don't do depends. Like how
That's
many.
even if you're using DevOps at all. Like
Exactly.
there's some shops that are still old school. They'll do the waterfalls, very slow development process. And, they don't really have the time or money to have somebody, spinning up new pipelines and testing integrations and building these things because they have a small team and they have a process that's already been tested for, decades at this point. Why change things now? So that there's that out there as well.
Sure. No, absolutely. And so, the point I bring that up for anybody who comes along and is watching this, I encourage you to talk to other people. Don't just use me as your only resource, because you will get varied answers on some of these questions. Because there's evolution. There's things that change, and they change differently at different companies. So we're coming up on only about 8 minutes left here that we have. So fundamentally, somebody comes to you and says, I'm considering software engineering or cybersecurity. What do you tell them?
I tell them look at software engineering. I tell them, start learning how to code, whether it's finding free stuff online, or I tell them to start looking at the, network and IT development. But if they've already got that interest in software, that's where they should go first. Security, I love it. It's a passion for me. It's what I really want to do, but I could not do it as well as I do if I didn't have an understanding of how, software development worked and had worked a bit as a developer myself. And so I think that knowledge that's what got me my current job. That's what I grew into in my last role before this. And I think that's really defining of my career, and what I see other people succeeding in the space is building up that technical background first. And then if you've got that interest, that passion for security, and that's what you want to do, then you pivot from there.
Good. That's a great answer. And I think that's better than I could have answered it. So following up on that, somebody says, okay, so I'm taking your advice, but I'm looking at Code Platoon or maybe other boot camps too. And they say, this seems really hard. It seems really intense. And like, I have to learn a lot in a short amount of time. I don't know that I'm capable of it. What do you tell that person?
I didn't think I was capable of it. Honestly, I was very hesitant. My friends talked me into it and said, "Hey, take this little test that you have to do." Like I said, my first time in a software development class in college, and I was looking at Java, and I was like, "Yeah, there's no way I could ever learn how to code. I will never be a coder. This will never be something I'm ever capable of." And I went and showed up to Code Platoon. Things started clicking. I started building things, and things started working. And yeah, you can do it if you want to do it, if you think you can do it.
That's great. And I ask that because we have a lot of people right now in our pipeline, as you well know. I mean, you've been there, who are in that exact same position that you are in right now. And they encounter this and they say, it just seems like so much. And I feel like I'm so lost and I don't know what to do. So I think it's always helpful to hear from people who are on the other side of that, who said, yeah, I thought the exact same thing about myself. So that's great to hear. Any other thoughts? I'll have two totally unserious questions for you to follow up, but do you have any final thoughts on all of this?
I think it's important for, even if you don't want to get into cybersecurity and you are interested in software development, learn some security stuff. It's going to make things much better for you to have an understanding, because those requirements are going to come down from somebody, and it's better to understand it, how it works in the process, rather than a checkbox after the fact later. And, there might come a need for security. And if that is something you're interested in, and you've already been showing that interest in it, you're going to be the person they pick to start doing their security stuff. And that's a good way. That's how I pivoted into cybersecurity. I was the guy as the application developer who started picking up all the security related tasks for the development team. Next thing you know, I'm now the security guy. And so, just look for those things like that.
Always a good lesson for younger people. Pick up things when you can. If those opportunities present themselves, jump on it, and your future self will thank you for it for sure. All right, so final questions. This is perfect for you. I ask everyone this, but it's perfect for you because you're a musician, you're into music. What do you listen to while you're working, or do you listen to anything at all?
Well, these days now I'm actually working more in an office, so I don't listen too much, but I do. I found it on Spotify. this great playlist that I think it was called like actually like for coding or hacking. And it's a bunch of instrumental electronic music of various
Perfect.
subgenres that has no vocals or anything. So it's nice to kind of just have in the background kind of groove to. There's no distracting lyrics or anything, and it kind of helps me focus.
That's great. That's great. No, that it's interesting because a lot of the musical types who I interviewed and asked that same question, they said, no, I can't listen to anything because I get too immersed in it.
Yeah.
And I can relate, like I have a music hobby myself, and it's like, yeah, I get too distracted because I'm listening to the parts and I get sidetracked in what I'm supposed to be doing.
That's why I had to find something without the vocals, because that's the only way I could do it.
Absolutely. So final question, what was your favorite movie over the last 2 years?
I just went to opening night last night of Deadpool and Wolverine.
Oh,
And
okay.
it was fantastic. I've got my fancy Headpool popcorn bucket I picked up over there. So
Nice.
yeah, I'm a big Deadpool fan. So that has
Oh,
been my
there we go.
favorite movie of the last couple of years as of last night.
Had you flexed before the show, I wouldn't have even had to ask that question. That's perfect. Well, hey, we're almost out of time. Daniel, thank you, number one, for joining us, for taking your time to join this effort that we're embarking on at Code Platoon. Thank you for what you're doing and for being a student, alumni, and still willing to give back to the community. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really happy to share my knowledge and experience, especially if it helps other people. I'm always encouraging other people, get into tech, get into security. We need people who care about it and are interested in it.
Absolutely. And if anybody has any questions that are specific for Daniel, maybe you want to, ask him something specific, hit me up or hit me up with any questions you have about any of this or about Code Platoon in general. Greg@codeplatoon.org. That's GREG at codeplatoon.org. This is what I do at Code Platoon is I answer questions for people and I interact with them, help them get into the program. So hit me up. I can forward your question to Daniel or maybe make a connection or something via email, whatever works. So Daniel, once again, thank you for your time. It's been great. It's short. It went by super fast, which is always a good sign, I guess, that things went well. Yeah, thank you for your time. I'm super fascinated by this topic, so I'm glad that I was not radically off in my assumption.
Nope, you're spot on. I'm surprised. I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about security and software. So no, thank you.
That's great to hear. Well, thanks, Daniel. And hey, I look forward to seeing you in the next alumni event or whatever that may be. So thanks
Absolutely.
for joining me.
Thanks.
All right, have a good one. Thanks everybody for joining us.